created something spectacular.
You got so emotional about it.
Oh my God, this is the Holy Grail.
It was a watershed moment for the industry.
It all of a sudden just took everything you knew and mixed it all up.
Video gamers across the country are anxiously awaiting the midnight release of a game called Halo 2. 3, 2, 1.
November marks the 10-year anniversary of Halo 2. And I am excited to tell you that Halo 2 is getting the full anniversary treatment.
The puzzle becomes, how do you honor the material? How do you keep it fresh and interesting for, a new generation?
Halo is about this incredibly powerful hero, Master Chief, and his AI sidekick, Cortana, and their journey to save the Earth.
We've always been very, very concerned with maintaining that gameplay to just feel authentic.
Dun, 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 dun. The moment that kicks in, you're like, yes, let's go.
We decided to go out and capture new source material this time around.
My friend's trust is not the issue today, Spartan Locke.
It's just absolute home run. It's probably some of the best fun I've ever had in Halo, and that's a pretty major statement.
At the end of the day, everybody has one thing in common, and that is a love for what we're doing and a passion to make this the best it can be.
So when I joined Bungie in 1998, I got hired to work on the Myth 2 team. And as I was working on Myth 2, in one room, there was this other room with a smaller number of guys in it working on something else, which at the time was called Blam, this totally top secret codename game that at first was a lot like Myth, as an RTS, but it slowly evolved over time into a third-person game that was on the Mac and PC, and then it became a first-person game that all of a sudden, bam, was on the console when we got bought by Microsoft. But Halo went through lots of different permutations along the road before the first version came out.
When we were working on Halo, it was actually the first time that we were developing a game first on Windows. And people don't know that because Steve Jobs got up at Macworld and showed off Halo for the first time and said, and it's being developed on, first for the Mac. It actually wasn't true. We had to scramble to do a Mac port of the game at the last minute for that Macworld conference.
And this is the first time anybody has ever seen it. It's the first time they've debuted it.
I remember Joe Staten, our writer, came to me and said, yeah, Marty, we need something. We're doing it on Tuesday, and this is Friday. And so I'm like, oh my gosh. So I said, okay, so it's just gonna be music. I'm gonna give you a CD. Somebody hits play on the CD. Jason's gonna go up on stage and hit the space bar on the scripted demo. And we're just gonna cross our fingers and hope that all this stuff comes together. I asked Joe, all right, what's the emotional tone? What's the story we're trying to tell? And he goes, I don't know, but it needs to be ancient, epic, and mysterious. I'm like, okay, ancient, epic, mysterious. So I called up my partner, Mike, and I said, Mike, I'm gonna come over. We need to figure out a way to do music. We're gonna record on Monday with an orchestra and some singers, but I don't know what we're recording yet. So this is, I believe, a Saturday, and we're recording on Monday. So on the way to his house, I'm driving over, I'm like, okay, ancient, epic, mysterious. Well, ancient, Gregorian chant monks singing. So I made up a melody while I was in the car. I came up with the whole melody in about the half hour it took me to drive to Mike's house. I walk in, I said, Mike, okay, we're gonna do big epic orchestra, but we're gonna start with monks singing and we're gonna end with monks singing, and that'll give us this nice epic ancient feel. And Mike's like, yeah, cool.
He's like, Mike, I got this idea and we got to be done with it by Tuesday. And I was like, it was just another thing. To me, it was just another thing to do. And I'm like, yeah, okay. Yeah, we'll do it. Okay. And what is this thing about monks? Really? Okay, cool.
Jason got up and pressed the button to start it. And if you watch the video very closely, you can watch Jason take a massive inhale of breath right before he hits okay, because there was one bug that would have just really been bad if it happened at that moment. So it was a heart-wrenching, exciting time for everybody, but literally that was the first time we'd shown it to anybody who was on stage, the Javits in New York, in this huge public forum. This was a time where big, expansive environments weren't seen too often, certainly in sort of the shooter space, which had been very corridor-focused for a long time. If you remember the demo, it started off indoors, pretty typical, but right in the middle of the demo, we took you outside in that moment of transition, and the camera panned up to show you the sun and the vista. And I think at that point, everybody who was watching and afterwards realized, wait, this is a step change in what we expect from a typical shooter. And in short order, we were out in Redmond getting it up and running on what was to become the Xbox.
Let me now unveil Xbox.
If you thought about gaming on consoles back then, there had been some big hits in the first-person shooter space with things like GoldenEye and Perfect Dark, but there wasn't a long track record of shooters being a healthy genre and a big genre on console.
Halo got it right. Halo figured out how to make the controls, how to make the balance work for first-person shooters. And I specifically remember back then people saying, this will never work. You cannot put a decent first-person shooter on a console.
So when we're looking at kind of forecasts and how the marketing team and the sales team thought games would sell, Halo was somewhere down on the list. It was pretty bleak. People weren't sure it was going to make it. Frame rate was bad. Shooters, are they really going to work on console? But it definitely became the hallmark of the original Xbox.
Not only brought the FPS to the console, it brought story in an FPS, which I think is a huge, important part of Halo.
The Covenant found something. Buried in this ring, something horrible. And
Halo is about this incredibly powerful hero, Master Chief, and his AI sidekick, Cortana, and their journey to save the Earth. I mean, that's it. I mean, certainly there's a lot of battles along the way, and there's a lot of drama with the Covenant, but that story takes a twist and turn, but your goal is to save the Earth.
Is it true?
More or less.
Being the standout launch title for the Xbox, Halo single-handedly put that piece of hardware into millions and millions of homes.
When the Xbox first released, it went to my neighbor's house. I didn't get one. My neighbor got one for Christmas, and then he got Halo, and I spent the next 6 days, I think, just at his house the entire time. We just kept playing Halo, and that's all we were doing. And then eventually I ended up buying an Xbox just so we could play Halo.
I played Halo at my friend's house and instantly loved it. I mean, we were throwing plasma grenades at each other for probably 3 hours. And after that, immediately went home to my twin brother and said, all right, we got to pool our money and get an Xbox.
Everybody back then knew what Halo was. And as a result, a lot more people who probably weren't hardcore gamers at the time began to dive in and made the decision to buy an Xbox and discovered even more.
When it seems like all is lost. When it feels as if you have no hope.
No, I don't think Xbox survives if Halo wasn't there. If you looked at the other launch games that we had, Project Gotham was a nice game. And there were a lot of games that proved that we could actually ship games on a gaming console, and Microsoft kind of had no business in doing that. It was our first time trying to do that. But Halo was the thing that I think made people look, and that gave us credibility in creating a console. We didn't sell a lot of the original Xbox, if you go back and look at the sales figures, but we sold a lot of Halo.
When we shipped Halo 1, we had doubt about whether the game was going to be successful, but we also didn't know if the Xbox was going to be successful, frankly. But we really didn't spend too much time thinking about, well, what would we do next, because the odds were stacked against us. Of course, when it hit and hit big, well, that's when we had to scramble. Our early plans for Halo 2, to be completely honest, were pretty disorganized. what everybody felt, very intensely was, we have a hit. We can't just ship another game like that. It has to be bigger and better. It has to have more features, more weapons. We knew that our ambition had to be greater, but frankly, we had no idea how to fill those shoes. So we struggled for a long time. Once we figured out in general, great, so we're really gonna go after the virtual couch. We're really gonna go after matchmaking and a party system. That team went heads down and ran. Okay, we're gonna try to tell a more complicated, hopefully intriguing narrative where your Covenant is a playable character. Okay, story team, go. And for a while, each team was off in the wilderness figuring out, well, how the hell are we gonna do all this stuff?
I think it's really important to be ambitious. I think it's important to have more balls in the air that you can catch at the end when it all comes down to it and you have to ship a game. But certainly you can go too far.